is heaven, West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountains, Shenandoah River. Life is all there, older than the trees, younger than the mountains, blowing like the breeze. Country roads, take me home to the place I belong. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home. Country roads, take me home. Country
Fallout 76 is a sentient game. It can tell when you're enjoying it, and it doesn't like it. How desperately I wish I'd been recording when my most recent gameplay session came to an undignified end. I was walking along, minding my business, when I fell through the ground, out of a world, died, and the game crashed so badly I thought I was going to have to shut down my computer. I went back into the game to see if I could recover any of my junk, and I could not. I should have listened to my girlfriend when she told me, after we saw a camp of NPCs disappear before our eyes, that I should record all the time in case I miss a bug. Anyway, in this video, I'm going to talk about my impressions of the latest update to Fallout 76, Wastelanders, an update which interested me enough to reinstall the title and give it a try. Ultimately, I didn't get very far with the questline, and not just because the majority of my sessions were ended by server disconnects. The expansion has largely failed to grab me and make me want to play it, and I think there are a few reasons for this. Firstly, I'll address the narrative of the expansion and why I didn't find it compelling. And secondly, I'll discuss some of the broader issues which persist in the title. Narrative was always going to be a problem with Wastelanders. Bethesda had originally had to contrive a reason for there to be no humans alive in Appalachia. Now they're having to contrive a reason why there suddenly are humans again. This takes the form of a treasure that all these people have heard of, but after a year of living and exploring in the territory, none of us have heard of it. However, Bethesda had tied their own hands with this scorched plague stuff, so the main narrative, at least as much as I've played, is largely a rehash of the inoculation plotline from the base game, but now we're trying to inoculate other people instead of ourselves. All the missions I've done so far have been repeats of the classic do menial tasks to gain my trust missions, a problem compounded by the return of the most loathsome character in video game history, Rose. Her dialogue remains awful, and all her quests have been to do just one more favour, to the point where I was wondering why she'd not asked me to do all this in one go. One other minor bugbear that I had with this edition is that I found the voice acting, surprisingly, to be somewhat hit and miss. There was one ghoul character who railed through his lines so quickly I wondered if maybe the actor had somewhere urgent to be after his recording session. And then there was one character whose accent was so bemusing that I actually had to turn on the subtitles to understand what he was saying.
Pittsburgh born and bred. My roots went back there for 5 generations. Can't leave though. It's just don't go north. Trust me.
He sounded like that episode of Red Dwarf where all the characters' voices are backwards because time is travelling backwards. I couldn't understand a word that he said. Yeah, maybe it's to do with being English. Maybe this is really, really common in America, but this definitely wasn't a very accessible accent to include in the title. There was one interesting storyline which, when I got up to it, really started to draw me in. I thought that the astronaut storyline was really interesting because it actually made good use of the setting. An astronaut who'd been on a deep space mission and returned to find the world had been nuked. It fitted perfectly into a Fallout set so close after the bombs. I also like the whole idea of being able to recruit unique NPCs to come and live in your camp. However, I was highly disappointed to learn that you can only have one at a time. I assume a reason for this restriction is that the game is online. That brings me to my main problem with the update. Much of the conversation around Fallout 76 has come to be dominated by the lack of content, leading Bethesda to believe that the addition of human NPCs would save their title. In reality, they put wallpaper over a home with cracked foundations. From a narrative perspective, a new story has been awkwardly layered over the old one, and from a gameplay perspective, Wastelanders changes very little. Gameplay and graphical glitches persist, server disconnects are common, and slow response times make looting and crafting a sluggish experience. Meanwhile, the stash limit continues to run counter to the idea of a game whose core loop revolves around looting junk, placing an inevitable endpoint on how much you can play before you can't move your character. Combat remains unbalanced, presumably skewed towards group play, where enemies will bum rush you and then chase you down as though their lives depended on it if you try and flee. One common criticism of the game was that the world felt dead, unliving, static. Wastelanders does not address this issue in my opinion. There's an old joke about RPGs where it often seems like the characters are just waiting around for you to show up and ask if they need help. Well, in Wastelanders, they literally are. They're waiting for the next person to come along so they can give them a quest too.
Do you ever wonder why people can't just solve their own problems? It often feels like they're just hanging around, waiting for us to show up and ask if we can help them.
In addition, presumably because it's online and most server response times, dialogue is also slow and sluggish. You'll select an option, you have to wait. After every sentence that's said, you have to wait a little bit before the next set of options come up. Ultimately, I think Wastelanders is simply too late to salvage the title. My perception of the expansion is coloured not only by my already sour opinion of the title, but by the fact that rather than playing Wastelanders as an unfolding story, as a returning player, I'm playing explicitly to play Wastelanders. It feels like a chore rather than a story I want to play. I've been having to deliberately go out and seek Wastelanders content rather than discovering it naturally as a play, as perhaps you might do if you were a new player. I've tried so hard to like 76. Hell, I'm even thinking of going back to it even after I lost all my stuff. But it will never be a great game or even a good game. Had Wastelanders been part of the game from the start, maybe it would have been better, but now I just can't get past how the online component inherently colours and reduces every aspect of gameplay, and I can't stop thinking about all the interesting stories and factions we never got to interact with because Bethesda decided they were dead from the start. Bethesda clearly weren't cut out for making a title like this. Maybe if they return to a single-player story-driven title after this, they can salvage some of their reputation. But for now, they've used up just about all the goodwill they had. At least I got my canvas bag in the end.
Excuse me? How does this jerk know your name? You're working together.
What? No! Can't you see they're full of...